Hey everyone, welcome back to the Sports Breakdown once again. So, as usual, we are going to discuss all things Sri Lanka cricket today because we have an upcoming series coming up, Sri Lanka versus India series, which is important for the. And alongside that, we have Mark from Sri Lanka on 99.94. I think we got Estelle earlier from a video, obviously speaking about the Sri Lankan women's team, and we will be discussing that as well at the end. But we brought in Mark. I think he's joined us before a year before. I think when we discussed Sri Lanka versus India that time. I think back in Feb, if I'm not mistaken, the Test series. So it's been a year since you've been on the channel. But Mark, how things are going right now? You joined the Sri Lanka on 99.94, which is a new experience. How has that been so far, the podcast, along with Estelle?
Yeah, it's been absolutely brilliant. I love working with Estelle. Estelle definitely knows more about cricket than I do, so it's always great to work with a great cricketing mind of knowledge like she is. She's an absolutely top-class journalist. She's making me adjustable every time we record as well, and obviously, it's Jared Kimber's big thing. So working with Jared and getting his advice is great as well. And hopefully, we're giving Sri Lanka cricket fans something more to think about and something else. The team we do. If you haven't heard about what we do 2 to 3 podcasts a week, kind of discussing all the big issues in Sri Lanka cricket. We cover the women's game, we cover the domestic. We have big matches. Maybe when we get to the Battle of the Saints, maybe we might dip our toe into that, but I think that's probably unlikely. But when we and of course we've covered the senior men's side as well, and obviously the youth teams and stuff like that. I love looking at all that and looking. I think it's one of the great joys of Sri Lankan cricket is being able to watch them come through from about 16, 17 years old and watch their trajectory, their careers progress. And it's been a great, since we last talked, Pavan, it's been a great year for Sri Lankan cricket, hasn't it? We're Asian Cup champions now. Women's team is progressing quite nicely. We had some really good Test wins last year. And now we're just, days away from the beginning of this series with New Zealand, which is super exciting for me.
And I think it's all depending on New Zealand series. Obviously, I think unfortunately the women's team obviously couldn't get to the semifinals, which we'll discuss that at the ending of the video. But still, the New Zealand men's team, Sri Lanka has a huge task ahead, especially 2023 is going to begin with some important, crucial things. And that's why I brought you along, especially for the WTC final and the ODI World Cup scenario right now, the qualifications. So let's discuss both of that. First of all, let's discuss about the positive thing right now. Sri Lanka still in contention for the World Test Championship. Obviously, we know there's still a small chance. You never know what's going to happen in cricket. It's really unpredictable to say what happens, whether Sri Lanka will end up in the. It all depends on this New Zealand Test series. So, Mark, your thoughts? Especially this is the likely squad for now. We haven't got the confirmation yet from the Sri Lankan Cricket Board. Changes could happen, but most probable we've also watched from the last 6 months, 7 months. The squad right now: Dimuthkarunaratne obviously going to be the skipper. We know that. There is Oshada Fernando, Kusalmendis, Angelo Matthews, Dhananjay De Silva, Dinesh Chandimal, Kamindu Mendis, niroshandickwella, Nishan Madhushka. We're going to talk about him obviously, but he's most likely going to be included, even though the sources say that he's going to be included. So most likely he will be. Ramesh Mendis, Prabhat Jayasuriya, Chamika Karunaratne, Kasun Raditha, Lahir Kumar, Asita Fernando, Vishwa Fernando, Milan Ratnaik, another debutant and who's been performing well for Sri Lanka A recently. Praveen Jayavikrama, all Asit Tamuldenia. News is that Kusal Janit Pereira and Chameera is fit. I'm not sure whether they'll be included yet in the Test series, but let's see from the Sri Lanka Cricket Board in the upcoming days whether both of them will be included in the Test series or not. But Mark, what do you think about Sri Lanka's chances of heading to the WTC final? Because obviously New Zealand currently are not a strong team as we see at home. They're struggling right now. They lost against South Africa. They lost against England right now in the first Test. They're not the Test team that we saw 2 years ago. So how do you realistically see our chances this time around?
Yeah, so God, I haven't played a test match in 6 months, right? You look at that squad that Sri Lanka putting out there, and you're like, there's more than capable, competent in that squad. And there's you look at the squad, and you're like, potentially as well, you know, the squad that can play in different conditions as well. The problem is though, is how much long form cricket have these guys played? Playing stick, you know, domestic first class game in Sri Lanka is quite dramatically different to playing 5 days on New Zealand surface, right? Can they adapt? Can they seize the moment? And can they get the wins? Because like, if we are going to make final, and trust me, Pavan, I'm based in London, and that, you know, the World Test Championship final will be played in June at the Oval. I want nothing more but to see Sri Lanka get to that final. I think the task is in front of them is absolutely mammoth. New Zealand coming into this not in great form. England have battered them in that first test, and I suspect probably will do in the second test as well. But the thing that New Zealand have is they know the conditions, and they've now played a couple of tests before Sri Lanka have. And I know Sri Lanka are in their special training camp in the Australia, and I think that's absolutely brilliant. But I think the powers in the universe, if we're going to be blunt about it, don't want Sri Lanka to be in this final, and they've done everything they possibly can to get into this final. In fact, you know, the idea that we are, you know, one series away, a whitewash away from making the final is against the odds here, right? We have to take a moment and look at what the boys have achieved and gone, actually, do you know what? They've done an absolutely brilliant job to get here. Recent it suggests that Sri Lanka could take one test to kind of warm up, right? If you go back and look at that Australia series, that Pakistan series, they took the first test to warm up, and that was a home series in Gaul as well. There's no room for error here. They have to hit the deck running. I think they need to look at what England have done when they've gone over there, when they're just gone out there, played with confidence, played their most natural game, and enjoyed the moment, and they've you know, that they've got the victory, and the victory is all that matters. They played for a result, England, and that's what Sri Lanka need to do. Getting a draw is a negative result in this incident. Of course, we're assuming, Pavan, that India do us a favour and win all their matches, but I mean, it kind of feels like that should go to form, and we're also relying on the weather as well, and making sure that the weather stays good. So do I think they can do it? Yes, they absolutely can do it, but there are a lot of other things that need to align for them to do it. So it's a small chance. However, Pavan, what I didn't mention is we are Sri Lanka, and there's only ever a small chance of anything ever happening for anything regarding Sri Lanka or Sri Lankans around the world. But that's another chance for us, especially when it comes to our cricket. So we're going to take the opportunity, and we're going to back the boys, and we're going to get there. And you've got to be fun. Can you make it to London for that World Test Championship if the boys get there? You've got to be trying to figure out how you're going to get here, man. I want to see you over here in this city.
Very true, yes. Hopefully Sri Lanka get to the finals. I think that's the huge obstacle right now. It's a big task for them, obviously, to beat New Zealand 2-0. It's not going to be easy. I think could be the biggest challenge right now, because anyways, regardless of how New Zealand is performing right now at home, we know they have always been a good test team. It's just that they are getting preparation ahead, and that's why they put the England series as well just before the Sri Lanka series, because they don't, obviously New Zealand would want to obviously try to beat Sri Lanka 2-0 and obviously make a statement as well, because this is regarding Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka is obviously going to be under pressure, obviously, right now, because they are the team who's wanting to go to and qualify for the WTC final. It's not New Zealand. New Zealand are already out, and they want to also obviously want to obviously beat Sri Lanka and just make a statement. But anyways, seeing this squad, Mark, I mean, obviously Matthews, Chandimal, Karunaratne, Dhananjay De Silva, these are just test players, and obviously they've been preparing for the last 6-7 months. My question is, obviously they've played in New Zealand back in 2018, Mark, and we know that especially as you can remember, Angelo Matthews and Kusalmendis, obviously they got a draw, if I'm not mistaken, in the second test match. They fought through a day or two, I think, if I'm not mistaken, both of them having a good partnership, and they battled and somehow got a draw. Regardless, I mean, obviously New Zealand won that series back 4 years back 1-0, and that was a complete different team under Williamson. But right now, I think most of these players have experience. They played in New Zealand before. This is a team that we can't say that they have youngsters playing right now, because even when you talk about the fast bowlers, Kasun Raditha, Lahir Kumar, they've played about 10 or plus test matches. Maybe Vishwa Fernando, I think they've only played in South Africa, if I'm not mistaken, in the overseas test, but they performed well there as well. But I think there's no excuse when it comes to this test team. I mean, seeing how New Zealand are performing also under pressure. I mean, this is an experienced squad. We cannot say that there's any youngsters right here who haven't played any test matches. I mean, obviously there are going to be one or two uncapped, but mainly, I mean, all of these players have played overseas test matches before.
Yeah. I get that they've all played overseas test matches. What I think is difficult, though, is the cricket is from having 6 months break of not playing any cricket to suddenly walking onto the pitch and being expected to absolutely. And I know they're in training camps at the moment, and I know SLC are going to great lengths to prepare them a camp that they're going to have, that's going to replicate the conditions that they're going to be facing, and that's brilliant. But I think considering that they're playing, inevitably when you go to tour, you end up having to play against players who are in their conditions. So the basis that we fancy ourselves against pretty much anyone when they come to go, you got to kind of take that consideration in for when we go away as well. If you look at you go look at recent Australia tours or recent England tours, and it's all about just learning to play off those surfaces and play off those decks. Now, I say that, I think in Kamara, we've got somebody who absolutely loves the kind of surface that he's going to end up bowling on in New Zealand. Also, the other thing to consider is that that's New Zealand team, which were at the last World Test Championship finals, have, since point in the country, we've seen them lose test matches to pretty much everyone who's gone over there, or they've had to go over and play. That they were peppered about when they went to India. They were Bangladesh gave them a real hard time in New Zealand, and that, as I mentioned earlier, England have given them a hard time. I think that we just got to hope the boys go there feeling up for it, feeling confident, and feeling that they can actually do something, and then kind of hope for the best, from a fan's perspective. I think the kind of fact that they've all got experience, obviously better than not having experience, but it's this large gaps between them. I mean, you said, you like most of our bowlers have played 10 tests. For most other for the bigger test play nations, that would be considered the infancy of their career. But actually, if you look at the way Test cricket is going for the likes of nations like Sri Lanka, where they're getting so little of it, that seems like they're kind of midpoint of their career, right? Which is a real shame, isn't it?
Yeah.
But there you go.
I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Mark, I also want to talk about, I mean, obviously our fast bowlers, obviously Chameera right now, obviously 3 months he's been injured right now. Would you risk Chameera for this test series upcoming for New Zealand? Because we know there's a very important ODI series also coming up for Sri Lanka, because it's like do or die, because anyways, if we don't beat New Zealand by 2-0, 3-0, we might have to go for qualifiers. And obviously we would want Chameera to be there for the ODI series being fit. Obviously, we know that he's injury prone. I would say same thing for Kuchar. Janit Pereira also coming back from injury. He's been out for a year. So would you risk those two players playing for the test series? So ideally, would you keep them for the ODI series? Because like the ODI series is like the biggest obstacle right now, because obviously we wouldn't want to go for a qualifiers, and the qualifiers are going to be in Zimbabwe, also the ODI World Cup qualifiers. And you never know, these teams right now who are associate nations, they could beat any main team at their day. So obviously, it's likely that Sri Lanka might go for the qualifiers, but who knows? There could be a chance for Sri Lanka as well, like the test series going on right now, obviously, to qualify for the WTC. I mean, would you risk those two going for the test series coming up, or do you feel we should keep them for the ODI series, because the ODI series is more important right now?
My gut tells me to keep them from the ODI series. I mean, from a kind of physiological aspect, obviously, I have no insight into what their, how severe their injuries were and how far along in their rehabilitation process they are. I imagine for Chameera, who's somebody who has suffered a lot of injuries during the course of his career, I think, when he's had quite a lot of time out now, to throw him back in and put straight into 5 days where he potentially will have to bowl really long spells, I think is a terrible idea. But again, I don't know, maybe the physios, and actual medical professionals, I'm not a medical professional, I'm just someone who watches a lot of cricket, have a better take on this, and they'll know, the exact state of his body, as it were. Then we're Kusal Perera. I think it's a slightly different situation, right? Because he's an opening, he's a top order batter. You mentioned, or fair on at the South Africa series. I mean, that innings, that was the greatest innings Sri Lanka has ever played in Test cricket, right? In any form of cricket.
Yes.
How far away is he? He hasn't hit a ball competitively in over a year now. That's a long time to be out. Where is, what is his hand-eye coordination like at the moment? Because also, I think with Kusal Perera, I don't think it's as clear-cut as Chameera. Chameera is clearly our best seam bowling option. Kusal Perera is, batters come in and out of form, right? So I think he's got a role to play. But Desi Merritt going straight into the Test side, Desi Merritt going straight into the I side, which it feels for white ball cricket, the Sri Lanka team is pretty set at the moment. How do who do you move to find a place for him? Does he come from Dickwella and in the Test team? I don't know. I think that's one of those things where you're gonna try and see what their moves like. See, is it going to take him a little while to get his his hand-eye coordination back in? Maybe they think there's a pattern that they can get away with that. What's his wicket keeping like at the moment? If he does have to come in and keep wicket, so maybe keeping wicket if Sri Lanka end up bowling in the first innings might not be a bad thing, because he might give them a chance to just actually be at the crease and get back into the rhythm of it. I don't know. I'm not close enough to that side of the team, and I don't think any journalist who probably would be to kind of make the decision, right? What I will say is both the white ball team and the red ball team, and of course the red ball team haven't played in a while, and the white ball team have had a longer break than they normally do, seem kind of pretty set though. I do agree with you that I think we want to, in all possible circumstances, avoid going to those qualifiers in Zimbabwe. Though that said, I do think in the current kind of white ball reset, it was that qualifies into the T20 World Cup in 2021 that kind of set us up for the kind of great run that we went on in that moment, right? So maybe a 50-over qualifier wouldn't be the worst in the world, but I definitely think at this stage, if you can avoid it.
Yeah, I agree with you. Also, we know in the Test squad, especially this uncapped player Nishan spoken a lot, I would feel. Even he played against he scored 150, and then in the first or second unofficial test, I think scored a double century, if I'm not mistaken. So your thoughts about this kid? I think you must have spoken about him, if I'm not mistaken, on 99.94 as well, about Nishan Madhushka's recent performance. But your thoughts, because anyways, as a wicket keeper, I think right now Niroshandickwella, as we see, he's an attacking player. He's sort of like what we say, like punt in India, but he's very inconsistent. That's the issue with Dickwella, because he gets out at times. He plays some ridiculous shots that is not supposed to be played in Test cricket, and I mean he can't convert those 50s to centuries. He always tries to get 50s. At home he's really good, but then his away record is not that great of Dickwella. But do you think Madhushka has a chance of making a debut with what you've seen so far, especially against England A, and obviously must be following domestic? I think he has a very solid domestic record as well, since Pratham Nisank is also not there, unfortunately, in this series because he's injured right now. Do you think we could try a player like Nishan Madhushka right now, who's in good form and playing well against overseas teams?
Yeah, I think for me, he's the obvious choice to pick in. Right, you bought that England side. They've used that as a chance to give these kind of emerging players a shot. He's also, he's also gone and scored runs domestically as well. I think he was involved in the development team that came over, emerging team that came over last summer to England. He scored runs over here. I know that people in SLC have high hopes for him. I think this might be the moment. My worry is I get nervous for two things around players making their test debuts abroad. Is suddenly New Zealand can feel very, very far away from your friends, your family, and what you're used to and your routine around playing cricket. Yeah. And secondly, it not only is it far away, but as I've we talked about length over here. I was like, it's the functions. And I think Sri Lanka fans, I've got to be careful what I say here. I think we have a lower tolerance to failure than other countries do. And actually, if you don't start particularly well, you can really struggle to get back into the side. And it can hamper your career. There's very few, I mean, Mark Machado obviously come on, but there's very few players can end up nailing a place in the side for a long time. I think Nishan it looks to me like he's got the skill set and talent to play a lot of test cricket in the coming years. And a lot of, I think he could possibly play other forms of cricket as well. So if he starts badly, his test debut doesn't go to plan, how much patience have we got for him? So that's why I all get a bit nervous about players making their debuts, test debuts
away from
at
home.
least.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah,
But I think they are sort of similar as well. And then Nisank had a really good test debut, and then obviously he got his spot in the side. Unfortunately, he's injured, I think, according to Sri Lanka Cricket and the sources, and he won't make it. So obviously we'll need a replacement. Obviously there is also the Fernando, but my worry is about Dickwella's form. That's the only thing. In a way, I think especially in a test series like this, you cannot take risk like that, and obviously you need to play a patient knock because this is like an important series for Sri Lanka. So as we know, Madhushka has been performing like in every test possible. His first class average is good. And I understand like it's very difficult for a player obviously to make a debut away from home, and this is obviously a hard task for him also. But I think probably he would want to take the challenge, don't you think, Mark? And especially a challenge like this would do great because anyways, they
I
perform well. Perhaps if he doesn't, also they.
I absolutely think he'd be up for the challenge. I'm trying to kind of address, I suppose, isn't really anything to do with it. It's to do with the culture around the cricket team, right? And actually, we've got to support our boys. We've got to be prepared. We're going to pull boys over to New Zealand. I have no idea if he's ever faced a ball in New Zealand. I don't know if he's ever been to that world before. And we've got to, because I think sometimes, I think players come into the side and we expect them to change the game instantly, have a massive impact instantly, when actually that's not going to be the case for most of the debuts, right? They're going to come in and they're slowly going to adjust to it, and they're slowly going to adjust to it, and it's going to take them a few potential innings before they really get a hang of what Test cricket's like, right? You see some some players who end up having really incredible careers develop those careers like that, and it's sometimes it feels like we don't have patience that we necessarily need, and that we're too quick to discard players. I can think of in back to the Afghanistan ODI series, they brought Danajay Lakshan into the team, right? And they ended up discarding him after kind of one and a bit games, and I say the bit because that game got rained off, and you're like, where like how must he be feeling mentally after that? How does he rebuild his career? Another player, I think, you know, he's in all three formats. He's come in and out the side the last few years, and you're just like, what does what kind of messages are they being sent? Are these players being sent? What influence is this having on their confidence? Are we getting the best out of players? Are we setting players up as best possible to be able to get the best cricket out of these group of men? That's ultimately what the aim is going to be. I'm not blaming anyone, but I'm also saying that as fans, and first and foremost, that's how me and you come to the game. We've got a role to play in that as life.
Yep, I agree with you. So right now, let's switch from the test to the ODI series, because the ODI series is what we want to discuss. But first of all, I think you've also spoken about this before, like the senior players of Sri Lanka. But my biggest question, as you also know that Angelo Matthews obviously played the first two ODIs for Sri Lanka A against England Lions, and I think in the second ODIs he scored a 50. And I think SLC are trying to put Angelo Matthews into the ODI squad for the upcoming New Zealand series. I'm not sure whether it's going to happen or not based on his performance in the first two ODIs. But do you think, Mark, especially for the ODI World Cup coming up, it's in India this time around, subcontinent conditions, 2020, and seeing how Matthews, he also said that it's, in LPL also in an interview, that he wanted to obviously play for the ODI team for the World Cup. And we know since 2021, I think since that West Indies tour, because of a visa issue, since that Sri Lanka cricket hasn't considered Matthews at all for overs for like 2 years, even though he's not been injured or whatever reasons they haven't included him for any either 2020 or EDI team right now. Do you think it's the right time to bring in Angelo Matthews, especially seeing that we lack a bit in the middle, especially? Do you see Matthews obviously playing as a batsman at least at number 4, number 5, then middle order, because we see Charith Asalanka, Shanaka and Chamika there, but at times they don't get into the runs. We saw that's why we lost against Afghanistan in one ODI, then lost a few ODIs because the middle order didn't step up. Don't you think player like Matthews will obviously bring some experience and value to that middle order right now?
Oh gosh, this is one of those questions where I'm really glad I'm not a selector, right? And it's obviously a question that's kind of in a way ripping Sri Lankan cricket apart at the moment. When you talk about all the question marks over who the selectors are and who the selector should be, and so on and so on and so on. So I think in general, Pavan, since I talked to you last February, I think Sri Lankan cricket, the men's senior side and women's watch, are a much better place than they were a year ago, right? I think we are a more established side. I think the players are getting more established. You look at it now, apart from the 100 and the Big Bash, all the other franchise leagues have lots of Sri Lankan players playing in them and coming in and out of them. And I think that's a great sign for Sri Lankan cricket. I think part of the reason for the success has been that things have kind of calmed down a little. There isn't, from squad to squad. I kind of feel roughly I'm going to know who's going to make the squad. And there's a lot of, but that said, I mean, Chandamar, we haven't even talked about him. He was in that squad in the white ball squad against Afghanistan.
Yes.
Angelo Matthews, though, he is some player, isn't he? I absolutely adore watching him. I think he comes across as a really nice guy. I'd love to meet him. I'd love to sit down, have a beer or coffee with him. I think he's one of those players whose careers could have absolutely skyrocketed if it wasn't injuries. Just that kind of key moments in his career, he appeared to get injuries. He's a World Cup winner. We know he's led the team on several occasions. It's the question: could he have a role to play in white ball cricket? Then I think the answer is yes. If the question is, does he have a role to play in Sri Lanka's future white ball teams? Then I don't know what the answer is to that, because I think there is, as you say, we've had the emergence of a lot of new players. Kus Pereira, who we mentioned earlier, imagine he'd be in consideration for a white ball return at some point, or is already in the consideration for a ball return. Sri Lanka's big white ball problem in the overs and 50 overs appears to be not scoring quick enough. There's Angelo Matthews directly, will he lift up and move it on? I've got to say, I probably think that he might do that, but how, is bringing him in, does that change the dynamic of the team too much? I think with this squad, I think part of it is that they don't have a huge amount of age that they carrying from previous ill-fated tournaments and ill-fated tours, and maybe that's part of it. Said the squad has been together now for 18 months or so maybe it is time to kind of freshen up. I don't know what the answer should be. I can see arguments for both sides. There's a really interesting interview with Mahela Jayawardene, who's kind of, in terms of play, he sets the tempo for what goes on in Sri Lankan cricket, and he alluded to he didn't think there really was much place for Angelo Matthews. So I think as long as,
but I think
the
seniors,
Mark, mad, and I don't think.
Yeah, I think several seniors too. I think Sanath Jayasuriya, former select, and obviously is a legend of Sri Lanka cricket. Even I think Chaminda Vas, I think fast bowler, and obviously went to the same school as Angelo Matthews. So I think several senior players also, I mean former players, are saying that Angelo Matthews should be back in that ODI team, especially seeing I think the middle order, I think we lack a bit of experience. I know that there are players coming through. Hasaranka's been coming through. Bhanuka, I'm not sure whether he's going to play the ODI World Cup or not, but I don't think he's part of the plans. But we do, I think Hasaranga, Chamika, they all can bat. I mean even Shanak, obviously number 6, that's fixed, but number 3, number 4, I think Kusalmendis obviously is going to play in the ODI World Cup as well, and along with the openers as well. So maybe there is a place for Matthews, but the thing is who we are going to drop also. So that's also a huge question over there as well. But maybe I feel like for the ODI World Cup, especially in India, and we've seen Matthews having a good record also in Asian conditions as well. And if he's back 100% fit, I think, Mark, don't you think, especially his experience, he's played 4 World Cups before, he knows all the conditions inside out. It's just that he has to be fit. That's the only thing. And obviously, we only need him as a batter. I mean, especially as an all-rounder, we do have all-rounders around. I mean, Hasaranga, especially the spinners will obviously help in India as well. Like thinking about the ODI World Cup only, like 2023, short-term plan, obviously, do you think, Matthews could fit like maybe for 6 or 7 months? That's all we ask from Matthews. After that, obviously, they'll have to think elsewhere, obviously, because Matthews only fits for like ODI right now. 2020, we obviously moved on from Matthews and Chandimal and all, but especially in the ODIs, I would feel, as you said, even Chandimal has a chance also. Both Matthews and Chandimal, perhaps, just for the experience. I mean, obviously, not to ruin the dynamics and all. Obviously, it's going to be Chanaka going to lead that side, obviously, coming in October, but just for the experience, obviously, Matthews has played in India before also in a World Cup as well. So that value of experience obviously will help Sri Lanka obviously try to go to a longer run. Hopefully, Matthews is in good batting form. You never know what's going to happen. But, for the experience, it would help for the younger players as well.
So my kind of take is if they're going to bring him in, they've got to bring him in from New Zealand, right? And you've got to go, your squad from New Zealand, you've basically got to go, right, lads, injury, obviously injuries aside, there's more or less a squad going with. Right, I suppose maybe New Zealand might have more seamers than spinners, whatever, right? You could say, and we could pretty much name what we would think that kind of starting 11 would be for either the first game in India, the first qualifier in Zimbabwe, right? And then you got to kind of go, where's the weakness? Where's the weakness? Does he fix the problem? I'm not entirely sure how much of a problem there actually is, or whether you kind of stick with the people you've got. I think Barnacle was a slight issue because I'm not sure he's just not favorite. It seems to me he's kind of taken himself out of that though, and just playing T20s. And the other thing that you've got to consider, which I think is all the kind of thing that Mahela was alluding to, was kind of what role do the older figures play in the side, right? When when you go in, the biggest aspect, the most time spent not playing cricket, but they spent just chilling out, being around hotels, at training, at what kind of role will they play? And I think that's the decision that's going to be made, right? If he's going to be a positive force on the group of players, then yeah, I see no issues with taking him along. I think they've all got to be, if he goes, is he happy enough starting, or is the question of picking him, is that on the basis that you're going to pick him and he's going to start every game? It's a very difficult decision, because who are you not taking, right? On the basis that you're likely to take Kusal Perera, yeah, and I suppose at the moment in the field for the squad, at least that Avishka Fernando, Barnaker, Rajapaksa are kind of interchangeable in a way. Avishka doesn't, as it stands at the moment, isn't playing a huge amount of T20, though I think that will change sooner rather than later. But as I say, I think if you're going to pick him, I think there's really good reasons to pick him. I think there's a real argument that he is the best number 5 on the island. Then that you've got to do it from New Zealand, and you've got to tell them you're taking New Zealand. You've got to tell them either you're our squad, or we're not going to go back and pick the older players, because I think ultimately, when you look back at Sri Lanka's 2019 ODI World Cup, I mean, there was some highs in it. They obviously beat England. But where did that squad that they picked, which was, you say an old man squad, most of those players are still playing now. Not all, but most. What actually did it do? It kind of, it was the end of a cycle. And actually, there were some players who will be playing in this World Cup who probably could have got blooded in 2019 and sadly weren't.
Very true, yeah. Because I think there could be a spot for Matthews, because what I'm thinking about the playing 11, obviously they wouldn't change Pathum Nissanka and kusalmendis. Obviously they're going to be the openers regardless of what happens. I think ODI 2020, I think right now they won't change that order. I think Kusal Perera, likely, I'm not sure. This is the thing with Kusal Perera, because number 3, number 4 is the biggest question right now, and that has been the biggest issue right now, because Asalanka, yeah, he's been performing well, but he's not obviously we have seen good innings from Asalanka. Obviously he's definitely going to be the number 3 or number 4. That problem has been there. The number 4, number 5 has been the biggest problem for Sri Lanka for a long time. We obviously brought in Barnaker. Barnaker has been bad form right now in 2020s. He's taken a break from ODIs, so we don't know whether he's going to be brought back or not. So that's the thing. If Kusalmendis, perhaps, I think Kusal Perera obviously would have to play at number 3 right now, seeing how Nissanka and Mendis have been obviously opening. Mark, you wouldn't change the combination of Nissanka and Mendis right now, right, in ODI cricket, with the way that they've been performing both in 2020 and ODI. This is the question right now, especially in 2020s. I know there could be a question, but obviously in ODIs we've seen that Nissanka and Mendis have been doing quite well. Especially in Sri Lanka, we've seen both Nissanka and Mendis getting good starts, and you wouldn't want to change that combination by bringing in a Kusal Perera, and perhaps Kusal Perera could play at number 3, and then Asalanka perhaps could go at number 4, and then perhaps bring in a Matthews at number 5. Perhaps that could be where Sri Lanka are heading right now, because obviously they wouldn't want to change that opening combination right now in ODI cricket especially.
Yeah, I think the opening combination is the strongest bit of Sri Lanka's batting, right? So do not change that at all. I think at some point Pathum will have to start going a bit quicker, and I think that will come naturally. I think he's such an incredible batsman to watch. As he gets more and more used to playing international cricket, he'll just start scoring quicker. Phil Mendes, oh boy, he's becoming a real handful of a cricketer, isn't he? We saw when he went to South Africa. Every morning I wake up and check if Pretoria Capitals are playing. If they were playing, I'd turn on and I was watching with every ounce of my body. I was willing him to get that ball to the boundary, and he never let them down. I think maybe one innings he but more often than not, he's scoring runs, and he's scoring runs quickly as well. He instantly got picked up by a PSL side. He wasn't allowed to go because he got to prepare for the test match. There was a bit of me that was thinking, well, is it actually better at this stage of his career? Is it better to leave him to play franchise cricket and just bring him back for the white ball stuff? But other people who know more stuff about cricket than me decided to take him to New Zealand. But yeah, I don't think you disrupt that. I think like the only thing is I would say is I think it would depending on matchups and depending on where you're at, I think you should maybe be slightly flexible at who bats third and fourth, right? So should Mendis and Pereira ever bat together at the same time if you're carrying so many if you've got players on your side that just don't score as quick as those two, and maybe is it possibly slightly better to put to be a bit back where in the lineup? There's a few times we've seen Sri Lanka try and do that, and it's never really worked out for them. The other two players I think who've really come along with their batting is Sharnika, where kind of going into the Asia Cup, I kind of felt like maybe his place was slightly under threat because he's not a frontline bowler. He kind of, I think, his one weakness as a captain is he doesn't really know when to bowl himself. And I'm seeing him playing franchise cricket and notice that he almost never bowls when he's captain, which kind of suggests to me that he's lost confidence in his bowling. His batting's really come along though, right? And we saw that in India. He was pretty much the only bright spot of Sri Lanka's batting, or he was the brightest spot, not pretty much the only. There's a few others actually, and Hasaranga's batting seems to be there is like some suggestion from if you crunch his data from the franchise cricket he's been playing that it's getting a little bit more consistent. And I think if we can get that sorted, then you're right. We just need to address the middle. We just need to address at the moment, kind of, from India. Who was it? It was the openers, then Navishka, then Dhananjaya, Dhananjaya De Silva, then Sri Lanka, and then you got into kind of Dusan and Ranga, right?
And then
So I don't know if there's like, I kind of want to just be like, get them down to nets and see where they all go and see what they do, right? But it's not easy.
It's a real headache, I would feel, because especially because right now Kusal, they're saying is fit, but I feel like Kusal Pereira has not got any practice whatsoever. He's been out for a year, and suddenly the Sri Lankan medical officer says that, Mohan De Silva says that suddenly he's been brought back to the New Zealand test tour. Like, he hasn't not played even any domestic cricket or nothing, and then straight away they're saying, oh, Kusal Pereira is going to be fit for the New Zealand tour and he's going to come back, but we don't know how good his shoulder is. He's been out since September. I think he was rehabilitated in England, and there are upcoming players also like Kusalmendis who performed really well in the LPL, as we know, and he's doing really well in domestic also. He could be a consideration, Kusalmendis, but the thing is he's been in and out. But right now, I feel even Kusalmendis is getting into his range. Especially what I've seen in the LPL also. I think for the Candy team that he played also, I think Kusalmendis did have a successful LPL this time around. And if you give him a chance this time around, I think Kusalmendis might grab it. That's the thing. The number 3, number 4 right now is the biggest question cloud for Sri Lanka right now, because especially Kusal Pereira also would like to obviously open. He doesn't normally prefer playing at 3. That is the main issue, and you don't want to disrupt the opening pair of Nisanka and Kusal Mendis, especially in ODIs. You wouldn't want to, because both of them had a really good series against Australia as well. Both of them did really well, and we eventually won that series, also ODI series. And it's in subcontinental conditions. It's just in India, so it's not a huge difference compared to like a Sena country to make that kind of change. So what do you think? Regardless, do you want to see Kusal Pereira playing in the playing 11 first of all in this ODI team? When you see right now the stability of this team right now, do you think straight away he does get a chance? Because all right, I understand the medical officers and all say he's fit, but then he doesn't have any match practice whatsoever as well. And you cannot bring players straight away in the playing 11 just because they are fit right now 100%, and you don't know how they've been performing. I mean, he's not played for the past year as well, and the ODI World Cup is in November, and there are youngsters also who are stepping up, who are performing well for the Sri Lanka A. Especially, we've been seeing some cricketers performing also, and Kusalmendis also has been a player. Ashen Bandara, those players are in the mold to obviously take a position in the playing 11 in the future. So how do you see things like that going on?
Look, I think they're taking him after such a long injury layoff, and he's not played any domestic cricket. I assume they're taking him because they want him to play. He's proved out, like in practice or behind closed doors, he's proved that he merits his place in the squad. Kusal Perera was probably the one, when he was in his pomp for Sri Lanka, even though obviously he was there. But when in what 16, 17, 18, 19, which is the kind of a very fallow period for Sri Lankan cricket, he was one of the players who was actually a star of that era, as it were. And he is a legend of Sri Lankan cricket. We talked about his innings against South Africa. If I do think on some level he deserves a chance. He went to the World Cup in the UAE in 2021, which I think was the last time we saw him, I think. And then transpired he was carrying an injury, and he really probably shouldn't have been there. He needed surgery and stuff like that. So I think it's a Sri Lanka kind of own, right? If they made him play through injuries, then if that was the case, then they kind of owe him. And he does. If our big problem with white ball cricket is we're not scoring quick enough. Right, it's a weird problem for Sri Lankans to have, because we haven't really had this problem before, because we normally have always have had big hitters. If we know that Kusal Perera in his prime it can be a solution to that issue. So I think it's kind of possibly worth bringing him in to see how he goes. Again, I totally agree with you. I think that it'd be a bit crazy to tear up the opening ship. Though that said, I can kind of envisage a situation where he ends up opening the batting because this. The other thing I will say is that all of our top 5, maybe even beyond that, batters all want to be opening batters, and in any one game, any 2 of them can open. And at the moment, Patham and Kusal have really run away with those 2 slots.
Yeah, I agree with you. Another thing before I move on to the Sri Lanka A versus England, because we've been speaking a long time about the Test and ODI squad, my another concern right now is Charmika's form, because right now we've seen Charmika obviously doing well with the bat, and when we see with the bowling, at times he's consistent. He just pick up 2 to 3 wickets, but then he concedes. I don't know. I mean, his economy goes 6 or 7 runs and over. His batting is good, especially in ODIs. His 2020, obviously, it's a question mark, but especially coming for the ODI World Cup, since we're focusing on ODIs right now, since the 2020 World Cup is over, do you think there is a place for Chamika Karunaratne right now in the playing 11 when it comes to the ODI team right now? Do you see Chamika playing in the ODI World Cup in October, like in the long run? Do you see that happen with Chamika, or do you think there are players obviously who could take his spot? Because right now we need a proper all-rounder who obviously because it's like needed right now, because obviously we know Chamika's capabilities. I mean, he's good with both bat and ball, but the thing is he's not consistent, and especially we saw in the recent series against India he quite didn't hit the spot. So do you think they will persist with Chamika Karunaratne, or do you think there are like players possibly who can take Chamika's spot for the ODI playing 11, like for the ODI World Cup?
Yeah, it's interesting, right? Because that seam bowling all rounder seems to be a bit of an issue for Sri Lanka in a way. If we think of Dasan Chanaka as somebody who's probably not going to bowl as near his 10 overs, he's maybe going to bowl kind of, I'd say, probably about 3 or 4 overs. And then if we kind of look, there's other seamers there's other really good seam bowlers, and there's loads of spin options as well, right? but they probably need to figure out and nail that number 7 position, right? Because they need someone who can swing a bat a bit. I do think it's a slight issue if they end up going to India for the World Cup and playing on dry, turning pitches. I would imagine, and I know I'm a big fan of this, I think someone like Walalage might end up starting in that position. That said, again, I think he's a much better batter than he is bowler at this stage of his career. I don't know if it'll be like that forever. I think Charmick is a really interesting character. You'll know the kind of the report that went out, what was said about him during that World Cup. He was out for the Afghanistan series. Kind of the things I was hearing was that he was going to be out for a while. I was totally caught blindsided when they brought him back in as at the next possible opportunity. I think really good at LPL. He's a kind of all-action player as well. I think Charmick got fits in this. I think he needs to. He had a dodgy moment at the back end of last year, and he kind of lost his form a little bit. But that said, on the pitch, he's probably done it more for Sri Lanka than he hasn't done it for Sri Lanka, right? That all said, I do still, my original point where I think that seeming all-rounder is
because weakness,
because they need to get turns out 2 players, and the problem is we're not the problem with. I'm not sure they've quite got that. The other thing I will say, Pavan, though, right, is time and time again, you go back and you think about the matches that Sri Lanka have lost. The person, when they're really in a bind, when they're really in a spot, when they seem to run out of ideas who they throw the ball to, is Charmick. He is not happy to. He will put his hand up and he'll bowl difficult overs, and he'll bowl against batters who've just gone and hit 20 runs in the previous over. There's a lot of yards, and I think sometimes he has a bit of an unfair reputation because he ends up doing the things that other people don't want to do.
Yeah, I agree. But I think there are also other all-rounders stepping up, obviously. But yeah, I think right now, I think they will stick to Chamika Karunaratne. Obviously, I think Dilshan Madhushanka is another candidate, obviously, who hasn't made his debut. I think he played one ODI, if I'm not mistaken, but still, I think he's a candidate. Obviously, he's performing well in domestic as well, who could potentially replace Chamika because he's doing well with both bat and ball. But as you said, also, I think Chamika, I do like his aggression, and obviously, he's passionate, and I think what motivates, I think, all the younger players is his fitness. I think his fitness hasn't been spoken much, I think, Mark, but I think he's the fittest player on the squad right now, I think, and that inspires all the other players also. That's why I think a lot of trainers and all also do like to keep Chamik in the squad, because he do maintains that fitness as well, and the fitness standard also in the team.
Yeah, I agree, and his fielding as well. And Bandara is the best fielder in Sri Lanka, but Chamika's probably the second best fielder. And surprisingly, something we talk about a lot on Sri Lanka 99.94 is how sometimes you see a Sri Lanka, when you them in the field, they've got about 4 or 5 players that they've got to hide. And you're like, that's just for an 11, for a professional cricket team, that's just way too many players. So don't underestimate how important being a good fielder is for this 11.
Yeah, I agree with you. So, Mark, we'll convert. Let's go to the Sri Lanka A performance against the England Lions. I know we discussed a bit when we spoke about Nishan Madhushka. But let's talk a bit about the Sri Lanka A performance, especially winning. Now we won the ODI series, obviously Sri Lanka A against the the England Lions today, I think 2-1. They did well in the test series. So Mark, what do you think, what do you observed about the Sri Lankan A team when they perform against England Lions? Any standout players do you feel that came out from the Sri Lankan A team, especially when they played against England Lions? Who to watch out for, do you think? Who impressed you mostly, Mark, in this tour, especially in both Test and ODIs?
Dushmanthachameera, is that how you pronounce his name? The bowler. He took a lot of wickets. Sri Lanka producing another spin bowler. It's not a massive shock. But he impressed. Lasith Cruz Pule, he's somebody who's been on the radar for a little while now. In terms of his batting, now Nwindu Fernando, again, somebody who actually's done really well when he's had his opportunities with the full team. Impressed me as well. Sadira impressed me as well. A lot, like most of that team I think are really impressive. I think when still to this day, I do feel there's a slight arrogance about the England team when they send any side out there that they expect them to come back winning. And I actually, obviously, this didn't happen either format or in any of the formats. And I think kind of, Sri Lanka put a shift in, right? And they got the result, which was good. I think that the test results are probably, to me, more impressive than the ODI results, because I think there's a lot of players that win that England Lions test team that actually have test, the test for Sri Lanka for England, and have played around the world for England and taken, they've got a reasonable amount of test experience. So I think that where that Sri Lanka A side didn't have as much experience against the team they were playing against. So all in all, I think Sri Lanka probably got more out of it than England got. Though England's main objective from it was just to get their boys playing in some continental conditions, which obviously happened. But yeah, I think it's definitely a worthwhile experience. It's last summer the Sri Lanka sent they weren't called the A team, they were called the emerging team, I think, over to England. And I think, that was a good experience for those boys as well. So it's good that this has been returned. I would like to see more Sri Lanka world and play cricket, because I think it's great for the young players' development.
It was great to see also like senior players also playing in these tours also. I mean, Sri Lanka A, usually when we speak about the Sri Lankan A, obviously the young and emerging players obviously play. But when we saw in the test team as well, the current senior players also, like Praveen Jaivikram and Lasith Tambuldeniya, both played as spinners. They obviously played that tour. Then Chamika, I think, came for one test obviously and played the second unofficial test. There were quite a couple of players, I mean senior players also playing in that test team. So your thoughts, and especially when it comes to ODI, I mean, Dimuthkarunaratne, I think, played all 3 ODIs. So that's good, I mean, especially for these young players who are not getting opportunities. I mean, the senior players who are not playing right now, especially in franchise leagues, currently playing for the Sri Lanka A team. I think that's good for them, because then they can prepare. And obviously now upcoming series is against New Zealand and Ireland coming up. So I think that's good preparation for these senior players also playing for Sri Lanka A and taking that opportunity. So your thoughts on that regarding the selectors doing that?
Yeah, absolutely. I thought it was great. I think you've just got to get them playing as much cricket as possible against as high quality opposition as possible. It's because I was wondering, because obviously there's a first class tournament going on at the moment, right? I was wondering if actually the players that they'd have to face in the first class tournament might present more of a problem, because they're more used to bowling on those decks than the English Lions are. But actually, people like Saqib Mahmood were playing for England Lions, so there'll be players that would be playing full internationally in the imminent future for England once they've proved out their fitness. And I think it's a really good idea. I think the blending of bringing the senior players in to get experience is good. The only one thing, and I suppose this brings us round to what we talked about at the beginning, is Sri Lanka just playing so few test matches at the moment, and that's not Sri Lanka's fault. That's the fault of the cricketing system. That it's it's a bit of a shame that we're having to play senior players in. It's and the only reason for that is because just for the lack of other test cricket to offer them, right? That is a shame, I feel. But the fact it's good that it did happen, because I think in previous iterations of cricket, they wouldn't have wanted to do that. But I think they're much more practical with the way they look at things at the moment. I've said a lot of nice things about Sri Lankan cricket at the moment, like as in SLC.
Very true. Yeah, I think it's a big positive. I think a big step, especially from 2022 to 2023. I think huge step. Obviously, there's a lot of challenges, obviously, but ahead. But yeah, let's go to the last topic before we wrap things up. Let's talk about the women's team right now. I spoke about Estelle. Obviously, I spoke with the preview of the Sri Lankan women's. We predicted that obviously Sri Lanka have a chance of beating South Africa, and it happened. A very good start for Sri Lanka women's, obviously beating South Africa and Bangladesh. But after that, after I think they had a break, obviously I think 3 or 4 days. Obviously they had to play Australia and New Zealand after that, and then everything collapsed. So obviously they had a chance of getting into the semi-finals, but then all the pressure came to these girls, and obviously there are some inexperienced players also in that women's team right now. They don't play that much overseas, so really we have to talk about the domestic structure also, which is a big question mark right now in the women's cricket. But your thoughts about Sri Lanka women's team in the 2020 World Cup? Because I think they performed beyond expectations, because I thought they might not even get a single point. Even Bangladesh women's team was playing better than the Sri Lankan women's considerably. They are higher ranked also in ODIs. 2020s wise, I think Sri Lanka is ahead, but still, I mean, all the teams that we had in that group were tough, and then we obviously beat South Africa and Bangladesh, but then obviously they went under pressure and obviously lost the last 2 games. So your thoughts overall of the Sri Lankan women's team, first of all?
Yeah, I'm pretty proud of what they did and how they won it. That win against South Africa was historic and will live long in our memories. I think, as you said, you were right to say, I don't think that win against Bangladesh, I don't think that was a upset, right? And for that, it's because, let's be honest here, Pavan, Bangladesh cricket have a better structure for women's cricket than it exists in Sri Lanka. A structure exists in Sri Lanka. I know SLC are working to try and put stuff in place, but it's not happening quick enough. Estelle, everything I've learned about Sri Lankan cricket, I've learned women's cricket, at least I've learned through Estelle. And, she tells me that we only have one centrally contracted player, which is Chamari. I think, tomorrow they should go and offer more contracts to some of the girls. They deserve it. They definitely merit it. If you've seen the performances that Chamari puts in, then you can see she's head and shoulders above most other the rest of the squad. And she's going around the world and earning a good, decent living from playing cricket around the world. So that kind of, that it's paid off investing in her. I'd like to see a great domestic structure. I'd like to see the team in Sri Lanka seek out girls to play women's cricket and start women's cricket immediately. I would like to see the big girl schools start playing red ball cricket with pads and everything proper fully. I want to see a bit. I want to go next time in Colombo. I want to be there for a big match between Holy Family Convent and St Lawrence's, or whichever school they want to play. Right, and I want to see the girls have big matches, and I want to see a women's LPL. I know we're expecting a women's T10 tournament. I think that's a step in the right direction. But I think that the girls, the women, Sri Lanka women did a bloody great job of that World Cup, and that's despite a set that's really set up for them to succeed. Let's not forget they didn't play any games in 2020 and 2021. When I talked to you this time last year, I think there was just some signs of life in Sri Lanka women's cricket. So in a year, they're coming a long way. Imagine how they come in 3 or 4 years' time. They lost to Australia and they lost to New Zealand, who are two sides that have a very good setup domestically, and their various cricket boards are looking for some reason. I don't think there's been the only other team I can think of that's had as much success in professional sport is the US women's football team. They're about they're quite far where Sri Lanka are at the moment, and the score reflected that to be brutal. So yeah, it's a great performance, and I think now that the women have basically hit the ball back to SL. guys, and it's mainly men at SLC, and they're going to put the structure in place. If they want Sri Lanka to be competing on all fronts when it comes to cricket, they've got to invest more in women's sport. They've got to create a structure in the women's game that's going to lead us to more success.
Yeah, because I think I spoke with Melinda Farrell as well, who's a journalist also for women's cricket, and she also said I think Sri Lanka, along with Thailand, Afghanistan, and one other team, doesn't have a proper women's structure. That's a huge concern. Whereas when all the other 10 teams, even Ireland also has a proper women cricket structure, and Sri Lanka right now is in like a top 8 or top 9 nation, and probably that's why we couldn't qualify for the ODI Women's World Cup also, because we don't have a proper structure. So that is a bit of a concern. And obviously the scouts also, obviously the selectors are taking the women's cricketers based on their school performance. So that's a big concern. I mean, obviously they need to form domestic clubs, I would feel, Mark, and obviously make a proper structure right now, because I mean right now these players, the playing 11, are doing really well right now. This team is doing really well. So like for the future prospect, perhaps I would feel they should perhaps make a proper domestic structure for women immediately. I would feel within 2 or 3 years, make a proper structure, and obviously let these players play a lot of domestic matches, and then hopefully get them also play more overseas tours. I mean, that's the biggest problem right now. Sri Lanka don't play that much tours. And I think last year we did play against Pakistan and India, if I'm not mistaken, at home. Especially away, I think. Especially, I think there's England series coming up in England, I think, this November, and one more series. So,
September.
what do you think about
over here in November? I think, Pavan, I think you should go straight to whatever club you're a member of and demand that they set up a women's team right away. I don't understand. I can't believe that we're in 2023 and these big clubs in Colombo want to be taken seriously as first-class cricket clubs, and they have nothing in place for women to play cricket. It's embarrassing, if you ask me. I think that we should, I talked about big matches or big matches. I think that's a obvious thing for teams to do. Look, I know it's easy for me to sit here in London in my ivory tower and preach about what should and shouldn't be done. I know it's harder to actually, rolling it out is much more difficult. But I'd love to see all these things happen. I think to a degree, though, I do think the role we can play is that we call these things to happen. And, maybe it's just the case everyone's various cricket clubs haven't thought about it before, but now we're going out there, we're saying it.
Yeah, I agree with you. Yeah. Also, your thoughts, especially I know Shamari Athapattu has obviously been the main player for the Sri Lankan team. There's no doubt about her presence. But your thoughts about Harshita Samaravikrama, because she's a player obviously who wasn't, in the greatest form, 2 years ago. But the way that she's worked her game, especially during the break. I've spoken this also to Estelle. But your impression about Harshita Samaravikrama, because I think in the Bangladesh match also, she scored 68 and won the match. When Chamari got out early, obviously Harshita stepped up alongside Nilakshi Disil and got that 100-run partnership. And obviously that was the first for Sri Lankan women's team as well. So your thoughts about Harshita, because the way that she stepped up, I think she has the highest individual score also now in the Women's 2020 World Cup. Because her style, usually she plays along the gaps and scores runs. She's not a big hitter, as we know. She usually rarely plays sixers. She doesn't have the power, obviously, like Chamari. But the way that she's elevated the game, Mark, your impressions about Harshita Samaravikrama?
I think she's absolutely been brilliant for Sri Lanka cricket, and she's one of those players who can definitely. I think her game would improve exponentially if she knew that there was more consistent finances coming from it, and if SLC gave her a central contract. I think that would definitely help improve her game. There's like you look at that squad and you look at that 11 they put out, you're like, okay, it sounds to me if nothing changes within Sri Lanka, then you're basically with the Chamari era now. Probably in 4, 5, 6 years' time, Chamari will retire from playing cricket, or whenever she's had enough of the game, and then move to if essentially will be the kind of Rishmi era, right? Because at that point she might have taken on that role of being a big hitter because we know that's what she's done at kind of youth cricket. But you're never going to win anything. You're never going to become a significant player if you've just got one or maybe two good players. It's the other players around them. It's the Inokas and other players around them that have got to kind of be allowed to grow into the profession. And as it stands, you know, they step on the pitch against Australia, and every single Australian woman there is got an assured income and knows, you know, he will have a significantly higher match fee. I know the triple match fee than the Sri Lankan women have. And look, I know Sri Lanka is not in the financial space as Australia or the ECB or India is, but cricket do have money and they can invest in it. And the other thing we've seen from the creation of the Women's IPL is that there is money in women's cricket. So let's start to try and give our women the best opportunity to succeed in it, so they can go away and make a living, and it can be another source of income for women from Sri Lanka, right?
Yeah, I agree with you. Yeah. So Mark, I think we spoke about everything. But coming to predictions, Mark, especially I want to go back to the Sri Lankan men's team. Do you think, first of all, coming to New Zealand, obviously the Test and ODI series, how do you see things going on? Like a prediction sort of. Do you think, first of all, do you think we will go to the? I mean, obviously,
they're going to go to the final. I want them to. Let's say, let's will it into existence, right? Let's just say that they're going to win 2-0. India are going to do us a favour and win all their whitewashing Australia. We're going to win 2-0. It'll be India versus Sri Lanka, World Test Championship at the will you come over for the? Will you try and come over for the final, Pavan? I don't know. Like,
let's see. I'll try my best. Coming to England before, it was definitely like, I mean, in Aussie or whatever, I could have come for sure. But England, let's see. Mark, I'll try my best, obviously, to see if I can come to England. It depends whether I mean, my time availability as well, whether I can make it or not. But let's see. Definitely, if Sri Lanka does make it the finals, a huge thing. Obviously, I'll try my best. I mean, I'll try my best. I think it's in the Oval, so let's see. But the biggest thing, Mark, is whether Sri Lanka will have to go to the qualifiers. And do you think it will be an issue if we go to a qualifiers in Zimbabwe? Do you think we can still qualify to the ODI World Cup? I think South Africa right now beat England 2-1. I feel right now South Africa might go directly to the ODI World Cup. Obviously, top 7 teams have qualified. I think even Afghanistan and Bangladesh, and obviously there's only one spot left. And things going, I think right now South Africa have a series against Netherlands. In case, I mean, right now South Africa are favorites to obviously go to the ODI World Cup. But obviously going to play with West Indies, I think right now might head to the qualifiers along with Sri Lanka and then Ireland, Zimbabwe and all. So do you see, obviously 2 spots are available right now. So do you think Sri Lanka would favor?
I think we're going to Zimbabwe. I can't see the Sri Lanka. I think the table conspires against us, and I think we're going to have to qualify for this. I think we'll probably win the ODI series in New Zealand, but I don't think it'll be enough. I think we'll win one or something, and we won't quite get there. But it'd be glorious because we'll go to Zimbabwe, we'll win it, and then we'll go to India, and then we'll win it. The whole thing. Because Sri Lanka, that's what we'll do.
Yeah, obviously Sri Lanka are the underdogs. Obviously, we go to qualifiers tournaments. It's been happening since 1970s. I mean, we've been going through so many qualifiers tournaments. We got test status also from playing qualifiers. I think for ICC World Cups also back then in the 70s, 80s, we had to go to the qualifiers and win the qualifiers tournaments, and obviously go in every World Cup. And luckily, the men's team has qualified in every single ICC World Cup edition. I don't want to see Sri Lanka obviously not qualifying for the 2023 ODI World Cup. That's the main thing why I wanted to do this video also. I mean, Sri Lanka obviously going to qualify for the 2023 World Cup in some way, whether going to qualifiers or whether qualifying directly, doesn't matter. But obviously being the top 10 teams, we wouldn't want to not see Sri Lanka in the ODI World Cup 2023 in India, especially in India, because it's some continental conditions, and it would definitely, I mean, Sri Lanka are doing well in right now in ODI cricket right now. Unfortunately, obviously, the Australia series wasn't counted in the Super League. Otherwise, it would have been really, really advantageous for us. But unfortunate things do happen. So, but anyways, Mark, we'll wrap things up. So, thank you so much, Mark, once again for taking your time. I know it's been it's been a year since we spoke as well. But I think
just need to put the light on. That's the problem, right? So I've got darker and darker because it's what time is it? It's 6:10 in London, and it gets totally dark by this stage. But
yeah, and it's nearly 12 a.m. here as well. But yeah, thank you so much, Mark, once again for joining, and hope we can get you in whenever you're free. I mean, and when I also think about a video, obviously, perhaps the review of the New Zealand versus Sri Lanka Test series and the no idea, because a very important month is coming up, and I know you're busy as well with your podcast and with your work as well. But hopefully things go well for Sri Lanka in the upcoming New Zealand tour. And obviously things go well for Sri Lanka cricket in the next month, because obviously next month is going to be the biggest important series for both the Test and ODIs, and hope things go well for Sri Lanka. That's how we pray. And let's see how things go for Sri Lanka cricket. I think it's going in a positive step right now. It's obviously now the time to obviously step up, and let's hope the team obviously steps up. Not going to be easy against New Zealand, but let's see anyways. But thank you so much, Mark, once again for joining. And it was great to chat with you. All right, guys. So please do check out, please do check out 99.94, especially Sri Lanka 99.9 for anyone who's watching it afterwards, especially the people who are watching. Please do check them out. Mark and Estelle, they go twice or thrice a week on their videos. So do check Sri Lanka 99.94, and it's a great platform. They do speak great things. I do watch whenever I can also, and I grab a lot of insights out of what they speak. So keep it up, Mark, and hope you guys do a great job on Sri Lanka cricket, because right now Sri Lanka cricket on the rise. So hopefully things go well. So thank you so much, guys. Do subscribe to the Sports Playground, like, comment, and share on this video. And we'll see you in the next video with more positive news. I mean, especially Sri Lanka cricket will be speaking next month a lot. So do stay with us, and obviously Test series coming up. So do stay with us with more videos on that. Thank you so much, and see you in the next video. Goodbye, guys. Good night.